I just wanted to thank all of you for having me. It's always such a privilege to stand in front of such an amazing group of people. And thank you to Jenny and Fola for sharing the stage with me. Candida, from the moment that we connected, I just felt very, very connected to you and who you are and what you're trying to do. Thank you so much. Waggy, it's such a pleasure to meet you. And Kareem, I think that our brothers have to stand beside us as we mow down what we see as barriers. We can't do without you, my brothers. So thank you for standing with us. Takes a strong dude to stand beside strong women. And Caitlin, I love you back, babe. Thank you so much for including me in this. I'm just very, very grateful. I'm going to take you through a couple different things. I'm not going to speak for too long. I find like after 10 minutes, people are like, yeah, okay, thank you so much. I'm a politician, so you hand me a microphone, I can talk for hours, and was already told this morning that I talk a lot. So there you go. And I want to talk to you about a few key things in my life that I think were really turning points for me that I think will help with defining the direction that we're trying to go with women's leadership. So I've been called a lot of things. And it's interesting how a woman's anatomy can be thrown in her face, you know what I'm talking about, as a derogatory comment. And you know the words I'm talking about. So I come from a family where we never swore. I didn't even know a lot of those words. I grew up in a very conservative family, very, very naive. And I got married really young too, which was wonderful. My husband's a beautiful human being. But when I was first elected, I was so excited. I was at my first Stampede event. I had just won my election by only 260 votes. I had outworked the other guy, like hardcore. And it was a person who had the ear of the premier at that time. It was just such a far-fetched situation. And the fact that I won that election was a miracle by any measure. And here I was, I'm having this moment of being an elected official, being at my first like really official event at the Stampede grounds, having super duper imposter syndrome. I'm sure you can relate to what that sounds like. And some random guy who was mad at me for winning my election because in 2015, we had two conservative parties. We had the Wild Rose, we had the Progressive Conservatives and the NDP won that year. And we were being blamed for splitting that vote in the conservative realms. It was really interesting dichotomy that happened at that time. But he was very angry with me and the party that I was part of. And he called me the C word. Yeah, that was exactly what happened to me. So my eyelashes fluttered and my heart rate increased. And I looked at all of the men and women that were standing with me. Like there was a huge lineup, right? And they all heard this whole thing happen. And you heard that deep intake of breath, but nobody said anything. Nobody said anything. And I was dumbfounded, truly. And I've been a musician and a teacher and a professional singer and a volunteer in my community, and no one had ever spoken to me like that, at least in any sort of professional setting. So I can still remember the smell of the barbecue and the beer cans opening and the sound of cowboy boots on the pavement, the noise of the rides and the music of the Midway. And I was a young Canadian, so I love the Midway. Love the smell of candy floss. And I felt my entire center of gravity wobble. And I wanted to say something equally grotesque back. You know how you just want to react that way? And but something inside of me reminded me that I had earned my place there. And I was worthy, and I'm smart, and I'm savvy, all of the things that all of you are. And it felt like an eternity before I was actually able to respond. It was probably just seconds, but it felt like forever. And I took this deep self-loving gulp of air, and I got my heart rate down. And I said to him slowly, I said, so, now that we've gotten anatomy out of the way, what's really bothering you? And he was silent. And so were the people around me. And you know how things go like this, dead silent, and then all of a sudden you hear the clanking of spoons and and everything again. It was one of those moments. But I think what that taught me at that time, and I'd love to tell you that these things, that was the only time that happened. Politics is, I don't know, do you find it divisive? Do you find it a little bit toxic? It is. Call me crazy for wanting to be part of it all. But the thing is that leading is actually about leading by example. If I was going to be and continue the toxicity that was leveraged at me at that time, I could have easily gone forward with that. But even in that moment of newness, I stood in that power of who I was. You want to call me by my anatomy? Good for you. I'm glad you figured it out. But what's really bothering you? What pain got you to that point where you would feel that just to some random stranger that you're mad at, you could say such a thing, right? It was just so beyond my capacity. But for a while, and then for a while, this is what Candida and I talked about. I tried to like show up like a guy. Have you ever tried to do that before? Yeah? It's kind of funny. Like it actually for a moment kind of works, and then you're like, yeah, no, this isn't working for me. So I tried to like laugh at the nonsense and be okay with the pat you on the head mentality. And I tried to walk and talk like a guy, and I was, I dressed differently. I'm a froofy girl. I like fluffy stuff and I like color, and I just didn't do that for a while. I wasn't being my authentic self. And I realized actually that it was my vulnerability and my curious disposition that was my superpower. And because I started asking questions, what ended up happening is really quite interesting. Like I was given this amazing opportunity not to stomp on my feminine side, not to stomp on it, but to raise it and to build her strength. And every woman I encountered, and the beautiful brothers, I have to say, they started to value my lens. And it's because I didn't curb my competency. And I didn't dumb myself down. And I needed to understand that the men in my circle, I needed to help them understand, and even if they couldn't empathize with me, but to understand my point of view. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way, I'm telling you, so many. And that's why I think I can honestly present this to you, because I started to present the facts, but there is no chart in the world that will raise the necessary emotion to change needed policy. You need stories, and you need a narrative. But I honored their emotion, and believe me, and don't believe the nonsense. Any of the men in the room here will tell you, and they're here because they believe this, they are emotional. And that needs to be honored and nurtured. Not turning ourselves into something to try and think about what we think men are doing or what they want or how they're moving forward in life. Are there differences? Absolutely. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the panel. But I honored them where they were at. And I'll give you an example. And like I had some really, really big downfalls. As you know, my downfalls were very public, which is great because you can learn from that. But I also had some massive victories, which are always not so popular because who wants to talk about victories? Like, why would you talk about how great a woman is doing? God forbid, right? It's always the downfall that takes the media cycle, right? And like, for example, in my culture, I'm Southeast Asian and Caucasian. That's my mix. So I think the South Asian girls in here can, they'll say with me, like, they'll agree with me. In our culture, when I was first elected, the men wouldn't speak to me. Do you know what I mean? And it wasn't because they were disrespectful or anything, but they were nervous about speaking to a woman of power. And we can be very intimidating at times if you're not, if you don't understand our spaces and our circles and our journey. And I was like, well, they don't understand my journey and they don't understand the barriers that I broke to get here, blah, 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 which is very true. And it's an internal conversation that I had with myself and one with my husband, because they only wanted to speak to my husband. And my husband would say, well, actually, she's the MLA. You need to talk to her. And I could have been angry and offended and said, well, fine, if you're not going to talk to me, I'm not going to help you, right? Like, it would be a reasonable response. But in my culture, good or bad, I used my cultural experience in that lens to understand what I needed to do. And I could have thrown my hands up and said, well, fine. But instead, I treated them like brothers and uncles and fathers. And I respected their difficulties in coming to terms with a strong woman leader in front of them. So I led. And I led them kindly to me with the help of my husband and the other men in my life that already understood where I was, my lens, and the importance of where I was and where I was standing at that moment. And I brought them into my heart, and by virtue of respect and time and patience, I got them. And there was no magic pill. I wish I could tell you that solved all the problems, but it didn't. But it's not about having the answer for every situation that matters. I built trust and credibility with a really strong and amazing group of men who still to this day support me. And I love them so much. And there's so many pathways that I have mowed down with their help. And I'm so unbelievably grateful. And I did this because I was confident. Put up your hands if you're confident. There you go. Now put it up higher. Yeah. That's how you show up, okay? I'm confident. I probably am overconfident at some times, but it's okay. It's served me well. And it's allowed me to learn, but it allowed me to learn from them and take a step back and humbly approach a situation with my strength, which was listening. And approaching, you know how, that the neck open, it's vulnerable, right? I approached open with the absolute certainty that I could get smacked down again, but I was ready for that. It's already happened. And one of the things I'd like to share with you is that if you think easy is good, it's not. Ease is the greatest threat to progress, way more threatening than hardship. Okay? And that communication that happens and develops as a result of really robust debate and good conversation is actually how we move things forward. And you got to be able to play in the sandbox. This is what I learned because I didn't do that so well initially. And remember that you're resilient and that you actually get to choose. If we continue to point fingers and blame people for what's happening to us and our downfalls, we're never going to be able to survive and then thrive beyond that. It's easy to point fingers. There's moments where it happens. Guilty as charged. And that's okay. It's part of the process. But you have to be able to pull yourself out of that at some point. Because remember, you are actually in control of you. If you're not controlling you, somebody else will. So take that control back. Listen, breathe, ask questions. And you do not need to be the smartest person in the room. You need to be the most intelligent listener. Everything I'm telling to you has been said to me at some point in my life. I am a complete... I am what I'm made of is what was empowering to me, what I listened to, who infected the person that you're seeing with a joie de vivre, and a reason to want to take on the toxic situations that we have in our life and to continue going. So, and conflict is part of understanding. Don't run away from it, but use your ability, particularly as women, to have respectful discourse in difficult situations. Have the conversation. We are losing nuanced conversation right now. We can't sit down and have a conversation without being called this, that, or the other. There's thousands of names for people out there right now, and man, we're using them. But we're not actually solving any of the real problems that are happening in our society because we can't talk about it, right? So, and again, trying to make sure you're not taking things personally is an easy thing to say, but this is actually about practice. You have to practice forgiveness. You have to practice letting things go. You have to practice being in the moment. You have to practice being an active listener. And the barriers that are in front of you are actually they're meant to be broken. What the heck? There's no fun without smashing through those glass ceilings. And I work with a group of survivors. And I'll tell you, and this is a group of women in particular, they are not defined by their trauma. No. This tribe has a plan, let me tell you, and they have chosen to not let their pain or the perpetrators that caused their pain to live rent-free in their head. How many of you have issues of people that are living rent-free in your head right now? Yeah, right? Let it go. Practice. Don't let them live there, because you have to be bold and you have to call out abusers, okay? We're bystanders right now and we're not good bystanders. You've got to call out that abuse, but you also have to be able to work within the systems that we have to nudge the system to change. It doesn't happen overnight. Just like forgiveness is not going to happen to you. You're not all of a sudden one day, oh yeah, I forgive you, everything's good. No, you have to practice that. And you have to go into that relationship every single day thinking, well, how can I do that? Because you would certainly like that leverage towards you should you also be in the situation of having made a mistake. Like I said, I've done it. And the weight of hate is far too heavy. It takes up way too much space in our world, in the spaces that we are trying to create in order to really, really forward the agendas of future women's leadership. And I'm a singer, so I practice every single day. In fact, I have a memorial service that I'm going to right after this. I don't just show up and sing. You've probably heard Amazing Grace 1,000 times. You probably sing it with your eyes closed if that's a song of your culture in your background. I don't just show up and sing it. I practice because I'm with people on their worst day. They're putting their mother to rest today, and I'm going to show up, and I'm going to sing like it was my own mom. And I'm going to be there for them, and I have 4 or 5 other songs and plus an intro, blah, 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 and all these things. And as I was practicing, you get emotional because it's about a human being that has been lost. And I don't know if you've lost people, but I lost my mom in June. And all of the things that she was disappeared with the swipe of a pen. All of the things she got, her social security number, all of the numbers, you know how hard you try to get like a healthcare number and all this stuff, and you're on the phone for hours and hours and hours with people trying to get a number? Those numbers are gone in a millisecond, one swipe of a pen. And you cease to exist. So that existence is important, and that's why I practice. Not because I'm a very long-term professional singer. I could probably just show up. I would never do that to people. I need to practice because I need to be there and practice being in that moment. Glass ceilings they're meant to be smashed, and the survivors group that I'm with, they've taught me that. They've taught me about that perseverance because they're not defined by their trauma. They're defined by their thrive. Be defined by your thrive. All of the other stuff that created the people that are here today, that's one piece of it. Where are you today? Tell a compelling story. Inspire the person sitting beside you. I have this young girl, I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm running for federal now in the Signal Hill riding for the Conservative nomination there. Thank you. And I'm up against a whole bunch of dudes. It's so much fun. But I have this one young lady, Irina. She's a refugee from Ukraine, 2.5 years here. She's a PR, or not even a PR yet. Sorry, she's not even a PR yet, not even a citizen. Guess what she's doing? She's door knocking with me for your democracy. Yours. Please put the apathy away, buy memberships to the parties that you believe in, and vote. Vote, vote, vote. And I'm not saying just vote for women. Yes, vote for women. We need women in and at all of those tables. But even women behind the scenes supporting great men is just as important as voting in women. It really is. It is a gendered thing and it isn't, but I refuse to use gender as a reason. It is a compelling part. I'm 51% of the population. You're 51% of the population. Shouldn't we be kind of representing that? Girls, represent. Be with men that represent. Honestly, we have to get off the fence. And most of the population are very centered, thoughtful, leaning this way, leaning that way on certain issues across the spectrum. Get off the fence. What if I took away your vote tomorrow? What would you say? Would you fight to earn your vote back? Yes, you would. But do you know that only 60% of the population shows up to vote? In municipal, it's less than 40. Trustees, less than that. These are the people who educate your children. I am telling you, I'm only here because you let me. You are powerful. Women are powerful. Stand in your power and use your voices to vote and get the things changed. Policymakers will only change when we make noise and make those absolute changes, whether it's to financial freedom, whether it's to make sure we're investing in women's businesses. Those policies are changing. We've done such great work and we have a long ways to go, but it's only because we've been at the table. Okay? I have a few more things to say. I want to just finish off with one thing. Is anybody familiar with the art form kintsugi? Kintsugi. Kintsugi is a Japanese art form. Hello, beautiful. Kintsugi is a Japanese art form. And I want you to think about yourself as a beautiful, beautiful piece of art, this magnificent thing that somebody created from in here and here, right? And it falls off the shelf and it breaks into a million pieces. And then you take the most beautiful gold and glue, and you glue it back together. And it's this magnificent, imperfect thing that was built from broken pieces. And it's even prettier and more beautiful and more stable than it was before it broke open. When you break yourselves open like that, and you're willing to listen and be open, you get more gold and more glow, and those imperfections become your strengths and your superpower. And you become a better version of yourself, something that will last the test of time. And when you fall again, you will pick yourself up and you'll add more gold. And you'll fall again, and you'll add another little piece. And every time that you do that, you will grow your strength and your resilience, and you will take the hand of somebody and you will pull them with you, and you will help fix them too, and add to their gold and who they are as people. And when they get put back together, they're going to take the next person's hand. And it is an exponential change to the world. And it is absolutely necessary to embrace the superpower of your imperfections and use those to be the drivers of women's empowerment and women's roles in leadership. Because those imperfections are such beautiful things of who we are. And I honor mine, and I honor all of yours, and you are a beautiful piece of art. Thank you so much.